Meet Britain's most notorious highwayman. The man who robbed his way the length and breadth of the country. Dick Turpin. His name is right up there with some of the most famous names English history has to offer. Robin Hood, Henry VIII, William Shakespeare, Sir Francis Drake. Names that every kid recognises but few know anything about.
Stand and deliver. I coined that phrase, you know, and you know what?
What?
I always did, every last bleeding one of them. I mean, who could resist Dick Turpin, gentleman of the road?
So what went wrong?
What do you mean, what went wrong?
Well, with your reputation, I was expecting some kind of caped crusader, not somebody who was dirty, scruffy, and, if you don't mind, a bit spotty.
Oi! Don't mention the plukes, or I'll mark it myself, right? I had smallpox when I was a kid. I can't help it.
When Dick Turpin first hit the headlines in the 1730s, England was changing like never before. The start of the agrarian revolution had thrown hundreds and thousands off the land and sent them into the cities where, for many, only crime kept them from starvation. But Turpin wasn't driven to crime by hunger. Far from it. Young Dickie had been born in Hempstead in Essex in 1705 and followed his father into the butchering trade. Unfortunately, Turpin's best cuts tended to belong to someone else.
Compliment to the king, mate.
Thank you, Sam.
In the form of deer poached from Waltham Forest.
Don't get me wrong, old son. This ain't no hooky meat we was talking about. We was proper criminals.
But there was a high price to pay for this cheap meat courtesy of the king. Even being caught in the royal forest with a gun could earn you the rope. But that didn't deter the hardest poachers of the lot, the so-called Gregory gang.
I done the butchering, and the boys who brought in the stuff was Samuel Gregory and his brother Jeremiah. And then there was this dim maltz called Mary Brazier, but she was just marketing. The flesh what shifted the flesh, so to speak.
The idea of the poor peasant getting one for the pot at the expense of the rich landowner is not what we're talking about here. The Gregory gang killed at least 2 people in the forest and attempted to kill at least 1 more. As a result, they soon had the price of £50 on their heads. That's £6,000 today, more than you'd get if you topped one of the Queen's corgis.
Weren't the same after the killings. Verderers all over the place.
What's a verderer?
He's a sheriff of the forest. He'll nick ya, judge ya, and jail ya. So we had to give up the poaching. Swagging cases, Samuel says. That's what the Gregory gang's gonna do next.
What?
Ass raiding, mate, ass raiding.
So that's when you joined at the sharp end, as it were.
I had to. No bloody meat coming in, were there? So I joins them on the raids.
According to court records, the gang was involved in at least 9 separate raids on lonely houses in the middle of nowhere, places like Chingford, Woodford and Croydon, all now swallowed up by Greater London. But back then, London was a fraction of the size it is today. To give you an idea, take a look at this map from 1762, 24 years after Turpin's death. London ends to the north, there at Tottenham Court, and there's Chelsea Village to the west, and Hyde Park surrounded by fields, and then ends over here at Tower Hamlets, which was in fact a collection of hamlets. Which is why the Gregory gang's most famous raid took place at the lonely spot we now know as the North London borough of Edgware. Just before dark, on the 4th of February 1735, Turpin, Gregory and 2 others arrived at Earlsbury Farm. Finding a young shepherd's boy, James Emerton, in the yard, they set upon him, binding him hand and foot before bursting into the house to find the farmer, Joseph Lawrence, and his two servants, John Peat and Dorothy Street.
Surprise and terror, those were our tactics, going there hard, and they'd be so scared they'd just hand over the reddies.
But Joseph Lawrence was a tougher character than most.
He was a nut in need of cracking with hammer.
He was over 70 when you tortured him. Look, this is the evidence that he gave the authorities. They beat me with their pistols.
Yeah, but not very hard.
They took the kettle from the stove and threw it over me.
Hold up, I've seen that piece of paper. Even he admits that the water weren't hot. Gives it here. Here, look. The maid had just taken out some of the scalding water and put some cold in, so that it did me no harm.
And then they threw me on the fire.
Threatened, yes, but we never done it.
And while all that was going on, your mate Samuel Gregory was upstairs raping the maid.
What he done with that dim malt is nothing to do with me.
And all that for how much?
30 quid.
You'll be pleased to know that old Joseph Lawrence survived the ordeal, and soon half the country were out looking for the gang. Keenest to find them was Lawrence's son Thomas and his servant John Peat. The pair got lucky when it was reported that horses similar to those seen near Earlsbury Farm on the night of the robbery were tied up outside a pub in Bloomsbury. Sure enough, there, half cut on cheap ale, were three of the gang, but not Turpin or Gregory. Soon more arrests were made, but Dick Turpin and the Gregory brothers managed to remain at large. After a short stay in Newgate Prison, the unlucky members of the Gregory gang were tried at the Middlesex General Sessions of 1735. In those days, trials were quick affairs, with the defendants getting little chance. In fact, in 1833 it was calculated that the average trial took 8.5 minutes. The defendants were urged to plead guilty, as that gave the judge some flexibility in sentence. It wasn't considered necessary for the defendant to have a lawyer, as in the words of one legal mind of the time, it required no manner of skill to make a plain and honest defence. Juries, who would often try up to 20 cases a day, would deliberate in the court itself, offering the verdict within minutes of the trial's end.
Silence!
Death was a common sentence, so common, in fact, that if a session ended without the death sentence being handed out, it was called a maiden session, and the judge was awarded a special pair of white gloves. Needless to say, in the case of the Gregory gang members, no white gloves were needed. But what of Turpin and Gregory? The noose closed on Samuel Gregory and his brother when they were spotted at a cockfight near Petersfield. When Samuel's coat accidentally opened to reveal two large pistols stuck inside his belt. In those days, there was no police force, and arrests were usually carried out by the public, keen to get their hands on the reward money. And so it was that four local lads set about Gregory and his brother as they slept in an inn just outside town. 100 years before anyone could shout police brutality, this citizen's arrest led to Samuel Gregory losing his nose to a sword, and his brother Jeremiah dying from a pistol shot to the leg.
Good mates, them. I owes them everything, but with them gone, I had to get a new trade.
Dick Turpin, highwayman?
Not just Dick Turpin, highwayman, but Dick Turpin, the most famous highwayman in the world. Stand and deliver!